Father's Day, so I'll be sharing some thoughts on fathers and Father's Day and such. I want to begin by saying that it's really tough to be a dad these days. Maybe more so now because our culture has shifted away from, men not being needed, fathers not being needed. It's difficult to be a dad these days. But, I think even in the past it was difficult too. Mark Twain once said these words: "When I was a boy of 14, my father was so ignorant I could hardly stand to have the old man around me. But when I got to 21, I was astonished at how much the old man had learned in just 7 short years." I can't speak for you, but that seemed to be the same type of relationship I had with my dad. When I was a teenager, I thought he was totally clueless, totally oblivious, didn't know a thing in the world. But lo and behold, years later, I'm married, have a kid of my own. He's not as clueless, not as ignorant, not as oblivious as what I once thought he was. It is tough to be a dad these days. I'm a little old school, I admit that. I'm a little old school. I do believe that parents need both a mother and a father. I think that there are some good things that a father can bring to, the table, a masculine presence in the home. I think kids need a deep voice. They need a firm hand. Kids need a touch of discipline. Kids need a keeper of boundaries. I have found that my son needs all of that, and he also needs a wrestler. He needs a karate partner. He needs a fixer of broken toys. It seems like he's breaking things all the time. And you know what? A son also needs a fixer of broken dreams when things just don't work out right. There's many wonderful things that we as fathers bring to the table. If it weren't for dads, where would we hear such things as, "If you break your leg, don't come running to me"? Isn't that really a dad statement? If you break your leg, don't come running to me. My dad used to say things like, "Does it look like I'm made of money?" It doesn't sound like something your dad would say. Or, "Do you think money grows on trees?" My dad was awfully fond of, and I think I say it, "Well, when I was your age, how about this one? How many times have I told you?" That's a dad statement. And, of course, I've used this one. "I hope you have a kid just like yourself." Of course, I think moms say that too, don't they? "I hope you have a kid just like yourself someday." Well, I'm thankful for each and every father who's here this morning. I just want to say that you have a wonderful place in your homes. And I do believe that most men want to be better husbands and better fathers. And I really sincerely hope that you want to be a better man, a better husband, a better father. I think that men want to give their spouses and children more love and more patience, more time, more attention, more devotion, more affection. But I say with as much grace as I can, none of us have arrived. None of us have arrived. There are no perfect husbands here, no perfect fathers. But I do think that through the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ, through His help, through Him, we can be better men, better fathers, better husbands. There was once an author named John Dresser, and he wrote a book, "If I Could Do It All Over Again." And in this book, he outlined 8 things that he would do. If he had a chance to do it over again, 8 things that he would do. Now, I'm not going to share with you all 8 of them, but very briefly, I just want to share with you 3 things that if he had a chance to do it over again, he would have done. And these are his words. First of all, if I could do it all over again, I would love my wife more. Think about those words. I would love my wife more. Because by loving my children's mother more, I would create an environment of security in our home. Our love would be something that our children could see, something they would never have to worry about. So I would love my wife more. Second, I would laugh more. I would relax. I would enjoy my children. I'd laugh more at their antics. I'd spend more time with them, enjoy being a father to them. I would laugh more. And third, I would present a more realistic model for them to follow. I'd be honest with them about myself. I'd let them know that I had problems in school too, that I stumbled and made mistakes, that I too failed. I'd let them know that I understand and that they could come to me when they had failed, because I've been there as well. So, if John Dresser had a chance to do it again, he'd say, "You know what, I love my spouse more, because by loving her more, it would permeate to my children. I'd laugh more. I'd enjoy my children more, laugh at their antics, laugh at their silliness, all the wonderful and crazy things that they bring to the table. And I'd be more real with my kids. I mean, don't you think, men, really, wouldn't your home be a better place if you loved your spouse more, laughed more, and that if you were just a more realistic model for your kids? I certainly think so. Well, this morning I want to share with you from Ephesians chapter 6. And Paul writes these words beginning at verse 1. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise that they won't kill you. That's what it really ought to say. But it actually says that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. Fathers, don't exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. And this morning I just want to share with you three things that a godly father should bring to the table. Three things. And the first thing that I think that a godly father should bring to the table is he should provide for his family. Provide for his family. 1 Timothy 5:8 says these words, and I have to admit, before I read this, I think this is a very harsh statement from Paul. But he does say it. 1 Timothy 5:8, if anyone does not provide for his relatives, do not provide for his family, and especially for his immediate family, he has denied the faith and he's worse than an unbeliever. Now that is quite harsh. Paul really kind of laid down the hammer there, but he was dealing with a group of Christians who basically believed that Jesus was coming soon, so they had stopped working. They had stopped providing for their family. So Paul really had to lay it on thick. He had to really lay down the hammer and say, you folks need to get back to work and take care of business until Jesus returns. And if you're not going to provide for your families and you're not going to take care of their physical and financial needs, you're living worse than an unbeliever because the unbelievers are taking care of business. And so Paul he hit them hard with this. But I really want to expand upon what Paul had to say here. And what I want to say is I believe that providing for your family, as a husband, as a man, is more than just providing for their financial and physical needs. Okay? Your spouse and your children, they need a whole lot more than that. They need more than just a paycheck and what I would call a couch potato, okay? They need more than a paycheck and a couch potato. They need more than for you to bring home the bacon and then come home and just sit on the couch and watch your game, all right? They need someone who's going to provide for them spiritually and emotionally as well. Because your family has so many more needs than just financial and physical needs. They have spiritual needs. They have emotional needs. They have social needs, psychological needs. Needs that really you, as a man, can only meet. Now, some of you might be saying, you know what? I at least meet the Paul standard. I do provide for my family's physical, their financial needs. But you want me to go to the next level. And you know what? I believe as Christian men, we ought to go to the next level. We ought to be better husbands and providers and meeting the needs of our family more so than what a man in the world would, because we have Jesus Christ living within us. We ought to be able to meet our families at the point of their needs. I know there's no super husband here, no super dad. I admit that, neither am I. But I really do believe with all my heart that you can be a better husband and a better father through Jesus Christ. Now, I'm not asking you to work on 10 things at once, okay? I just want you to think about one way, as a man, one way that you could be a better husband or a better father in your family. Just one way. Some of you, it may be to up your level spiritually. Maybe perhaps you bring your wife, you bring your kid to church. That's awesome. I'm thankful for that. Maybe, however, you could also pray with your family. Okay, just up your level. Some of you, it's maybe spending more time with your family. You're doing a good job of working. You're taking care of that financially, those physical needs. But socially, you're really not spending the time with them that they need. So just think of one area that you could take a positive step and just raise your level of being a godly man in your home. I believe that it'll make a huge difference in the life of your spouse as well as your children. If there's one thing I want to give my dad credit for, he was a hard worker. My dad worked for a company in Springfield called Kelsey Hayes. And Kelsey Hayes made these gears for Bell helicopters, big, gigantic gears. And my dad, for 35 years. I mean, every morning he'd wake up. I never recall my dad missing a day of work. My wife and I, we laugh about this, and this is true. My dad died of cancer, but before that, we never recall him ever really being sick. It was the oddest thing. Well, I mean, did he? He never seemed to have colds, flus, anything of that nature. It was the oddest thing. That's why it's kind of surprising that he got, colon cancer and died, because he really never was sick. But my dad, he worked Monday through Friday, sometimes Saturdays, and I could always remember, I always knew when my dad was home, and I'll tell you why. Because when he walked through the door, you could smell the oil. Because he worked at a factory, and he worked grinding those gears all day. And when he walked through the door, you could just smell the oil. That's how you knew Dad was home, right? My dad my dad had a high school education, but he did the best he could with what he had, and I commend him for that. But there were some other areas that he could have manned up. Okay, here's one. My dad was how can I say this? He was not affectionate at all. The best I ever got out of my dad was a handshake. That was it. There was never no lovey-dovey, I love you, son, or anything like that. Never anything, no hugs, you name it. The best I ever got out of him was a handshake. And really, I tell you, it wasn't until he was nearing the end of his life, because he had terminal cancer, that I think he actually hugged me. But see, that's something that your children need from you, men. Your spouse, your children, they need hugs, they need kisses, they need physical affection. All right? So that, I'm just asking you, if there's some areas, like my dad, he could have been a better dad. My dad also socially could have been better. My dad was a very popular kind of guy, but he liked to go to the KFC, he liked to go to the Moose, the Elks, he liked to spend time there with his friends and other such things. But a lot of times he wasn't at home where he ought to have been, spending time with his family. He could have been a better dad. I wish that there would have been a preacher who would have encouraged him along the way to say, in one area, bring your level up. There's nothing wrong with hugging your kids. There's nothing wrong with spending time with your family. Up your level. Now, some of you have fathers who are still alive. My dad's gone. He died in, 2003, at the age of 63. But some of you still have fathers. If your dad loved you, if he was a good man, if he took care of your needs, provided for you, if he also provided for those needs, such as socially, emotionally, spiritually, you name it, I think you need to get on the horn and thank him this morning. You need to give him a call. You need to take him out to dinner. Lavish him with a little bit of love, because he deserves it. So first, I believe the godly father, he provides. Okay, and you much more than just financial needs. You need to provide for your family spiritually, emotionally, socially as well. Now, secondly, I believe that a father guides. A father guides, and Paul spells this out in verse 4. Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. And I really love the way the Living Bible interprets this verse. It says, don't, and we got to take this to heart, not only men, but mothers as well. Okay, take this to heart. The Living Bible, I love the way it puts it. Don't keep on nagging and scolding your children, making them angry and defensive. Rather, bring them up with the loving discipline the Lord himself approves. So I really like the way the Living Bible puts that, because it really hits you, it really nails you in the head. Don't keep on nagging and scolding your children. I got to tell you something. It is so much easier to nag and scold your children than it is to train and guide them. Because you know what? When you nag and scold, that's reactive. When you train and guide, that's proactive. And it takes a lot more work to be proactive than reactive. Okay? And that's why Paul says, you know what, you got to move beyond just this nagging and scolding, reacting toward your children. And you've got to be proactive in guiding them and training them and leading them. And if you choose this path, now there's going to be times you're going to nag and scold them. But if you choose this path, in the end, it's much better for your kids. Now, let me give you an example. When Amy and I lived in Elwood, Indiana, we lived in a parsonage. And we got this bright idea to adopt a little puppy or go to the animal shelter and adopt a dog. So I went to the animal shelter. There was a little beagle there, and she was just as cute as a button. She was probably about 9 months old. And so I adopted this dog. We named her Sweet Pea from the animal shelter. And she was totally untrained, not housebroken, you name it. Well, I'm living in the parsonage. I got a dog, and of course, we bring the dog home. The dog's making messes and just out of control. You name it. She wouldn't obey. She was just a little monster. And of course, the people at the church, they want to be helpful. Okay? All right? And so they're giving you all kinds of advice. Well, you need to rub her nose in it. Or you need to wad up a newspaper and smack that dog over the nose real good. Teach her a lesson, and then she'll stop doing all this stuff. Well, for your information, sometimes that doesn't work, okay? All right. Thank you for your advice, but it didn't work, all right? And so the dog was out of control. And so, but, I got a bright idea. I went to the bookstore, and I found the best dog training book I could find. And from that day forward, I went from reacting to the dog to proactively training and guiding and leading the dog, okay? And so I taught that dog, I followed the manual by the letter. I taught her, first thing, teach that dog how to sit. Blam, I could get her to sit. And then after I got her to sit, I taught her how to stay. And then after I taught her how to stay, I taught her how to go. And then I taught her how to lay. And you name it. One by one, I began just adding on. And you know what? I want to tell you what. Sweet Pea became just an awesome little dog because of it. Because I went from beyond reacting, which was nagging, scolding, punishing, into guiding and training and disciplining her. Now, do any of you own dogs? Any of you own dogs? Oh, good. I'm going to teach you something here today. This might be very interesting to you, okay? This is what the dog manual says, okay? You're going to learn something today. Nothing else to say. I learned this. Did you know that your dog is never supposed to enter the home before you do? Were you aware of that? If you and your dog, if your dog's outside and you're with your dog, if you come to the door, you always open the door, you have the dog sit, you open the door, you walk in through the door, and then the dog comes in behind you. Were you aware of that? Yeah, that's exactly. Because dogs are pack animals, all right? And you know what? You're the lead dog. Believe it or not, you are the head honcho. You're the leader of the pack. And when the dog runs through the door before you, the dog is basically saying, I'm the leader of the pack, and I'm in charge. And, and some of you can tell, by the way, when you go walking your dog takes off without you. You're kind of like running behind the dog. That's because the dog thinks it's the leader of the pack. So you got to train that dog. And I would do it with Sweet Pea. I'd say, sit, and then I'd enter into the home, and then I'd have her come in behind me, all right? That's all part of the training and the process of guiding the dog. Now, what I'm trying to say here is that on the front end, it's always easier to react. It's always easier to nag and scold. But you know what? If you do the hard work on the front end, if you train, if you guide, if you lead, I want to tell you something. It pays big dividends on the back end always. And it's true of our children as well. Now that I've said this, I want to say that concerning the nagging and scolding, okay? All right? I'm guilty. Anybody here not guilty of nagging and scolding your children? All right? If you raise your hand and say, I never nagged and scolded my children, well, you need to come down to the altar and confess that sin of lying, because we've all been there. We've all been there. It does, you know what, nagging and scolding, it's good for us. I hate to say it, it's good for us. It feels good to lay into the little one, doesn't it? It feels good to nag and scold. I admit it, all right? However, I want to lay down at least a ground rule concerning nagging and scolding that I have lived by, that I think all of us should live by. And I think when you nag and scold, it should always be focused around the behavior that the child does and not who the child is fundamentally as a person. Okay? For instance, I think it's okay to say to your son, you're acting stubborn. But it's not okay to say, you're stubborn. You're acting hard-headed. You're hard-headed. you name it. You're I don't even know how else, you name it, okay? You're acting, it's much better to say you're acting a certain way than to say you are. And I want to tell you something. Whenever you say you're acting a certain way, it actually empowers the child. It lets them know that they can stop acting in that fashion. So if you say to your son or daughter, stop acting hard-headed, right? Now they have an opportunity to stop acting hard-headed. But if you say to them, you are hard-headed, there's no impetus for them to change. Then they begin to feeling that, well, I'm just hard-headed. That's just the way that I am, and I can't change. All right? So if you're going to nag, if you're going to scold, lay down some ground rules. Focus upon the behavior that the child is doing and not necessarily who the child is fundamentally as a person. Because I have found this, and for those of you who have kids, you know this. People don't change. My son, it hasn't, fundamentally as a person. It was so funny yesterday. We went to this thing and we had to park the car in the grass, and the grass was high. And he kind of tiptoed through the grass like this. And you know what he said to me? I hate grass. I don't like the grass. It is so funny. When he was like a little toddler, began to crawl and walk. It was so funny. We could put him on a little blankie in the middle of our yard, and he would never get off the little blankie. Never! Because he hated the grass. I'm telling you, the kid was 6, 7, 8 months, 9 months old. Didn't like the grass. Didn't like the feel of the grass. He's 10 years old, and he's still the same way. Isn't that odd? But that's how people are. They're fundamentally a certain way. And you have to accept your child fundamentally as he or she truly is. Because there's some things about your child, you know it. They just don't change. However, you can help your child to stop acting in a certain fashion. So if you're going to nag or scold, focus on the behavior, not who they are fundamentally as a person. All right, so you want to guide them. You want to lead them. You want to give them the loving leadership that they need. So the first thing we do is we provide, we guide. Now, a third thing that we need to do is we need to exemplify. Okay, exemplify. And Paul spells this out in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 8. And he says these words, we loved you so much that we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but share our lives as well. Okay, now as parents, we have a responsibility as godly men to share the gospel with our families. Okay? But you know what? We also have to do the other thing, and that's share our lives as well. We want to definitely share with them the good news of Jesus Christ, but also provide good news to them by being the type of godly examples that we are called to be in Jesus Christ. We've got to talk it. We've got to walk it. We've got to share it. We've got to also wear it. We've got to give it. We've got to live it. Anything short of that, and we're just doing our families a grave disservice. Share the gospel. Share our lives. Share our testimony. Share our example. I hate to say it, I grew up in a home where my father said, do as I say, not as I do. That's the kind of home that I grew up in. Do as I say, not as I do. I hope that none of you said that to your kids. Do as I say, not as I do. I really think that that's not the right tack we want to take as parents. My father, as I shared with you, he was a drinker. He was a drinker. And he was absolutely adamant that we shouldn't drink. Does that make sense to you? The first time I came home drunk, I was in the 9th grade. I was stone cold drunk. Went out with some friends, drinking. Came home stone cold drunk. My dad nearly beat me to a pulp because I was drunk. But you know what? 2 or 3 times a week he'd come home drunk. It was the do as I say, not as I do. And it's sad for me to say this, and I'll get into something in a moment, but anything that you do in moderation, your kid will do to excess. That's a fact. Anything that one generation does in moderation, the next generation does to excess. So my dad was a drinker, heavy drinker, right? So what happened? His kids became drinkers, but you know what? They took it to the next level. 3 of them became drug abusers. All right, they went to the next level. That which was, in moderation, went to excess. My sister 3 years ago passed away, died of a heroin overdose. That's how it works, folks. I'm saying to you as a godly father, and I want you to hear me on this, and this is as a mother as well. If you are doing something that you do not want your kids to do, you should not do it as well. Flat out. Anything in your life that you don't want your kid to do, you stop doing it. If you don't want your kid to drink, you stop drinking. If you don't want your kid to cuss, then you don't cuss. If you don't want your kids to hate, you stop hating. Whatever you want your kid not to do, okay, you don't do it as well. All right? You cannot live by do as I say, not as I do. It just won't cut it, because your child will inevitably and always do what you do irrespective of what you say. Now, that's the negative side of it. That's the negative side of exemplifying or modeling. But there's also a positive side. And so, what are some of the good things that you're modeling for your family? What are some of the good things? Are you modeling a life of love? Are you modeling for your children generosity, respecting others, a life of servanthood? Are you modeling for them do unto others as you would have do unto others as you would have others do unto you? Are you modeling that kind of a positive life for them? How do you treat the person in the pew around you? How do you treat your neighbor, your co-workers? How do you treat your family and friends? These are all ways that you can positively model good behaviors for them. One man shared this testimony about his father, and I think this guy probably had a great dad to grow up with. When I was a teenager, he wrote, Dad would come into my room and say, "Come on, kid, let's go." And I'd say, "Well, where to?" "We're going to Lucy's, let's go." Remember, he was a teenager. Once a month, my dad would visit a woman named Lucy. She was severely crippled with arthritis and bound to a wheelchair, but once a month, my dad would stop by her place, reach his big arms around her frail body, lift her out of a wheelchair, and place her in the front seat of our brown station wagon. He'd unfold the wheelchair, throw it in the back of the station wagon, and he would drive Lucy to the monthly communion service for shut-ins. My dad was the vice president of a publishing company, but he was humble enough to shuttle shut-ins. And this he did for many years. Later in life, my dad had a massive heart attack, and while in the hospital, trying to recover, he somehow, don't know how, found out that a family down the street didn't have enough money to buy groceries. So he wrote out for them a very generous check. There was my dad on his deathbed, but he was thinking about and caring for others. That was the very last thing my dad ever wrote in his life. That check for a family that was hurting. He wrote it. After he wrote it, he shortly passed away. But what a lasting lesson. What a lasting lesson of all the wonderful things that my father brought to the table. So I ask you, what are you exemplifying, modeling, demonstrating for your wife and children? Well, this morning, I hope this sermon hasn't been too difficult. I believe that a godly father brings 3 things to the table at least, and so much more. But first, we ought to provide for our families. And providing means more than just financial and for their financial and physical needs. We also have to provide for their spiritual needs, their emotional needs, their affection needs. You name it. You are so much more important to your families than you realize. You just can't bring home the bacon and be a couch potato. They have needs, other needs that need to be met as well. Second, a father guides. Paul says, stop nagging. Stop scolding your children, but provide for them loving leadership, loving guidance. Don't be a reactive parent. Be proactive in your stance toward them. And thirdly, a godly father exemplifies. We can't live according to do as I say, not as I do. We have to lead by our example. Well, I'm glad that you're here this morning, and I am thankful for each and every father here. And I do believe that most men want to be better fathers and better husbands in their families. I do believe that you want to give your spouse and your children more love, more patience, more time, more attention, more affection. I said more a lot there, didn't I? More. But I want to say this before I close. The fact is, we can't give more in the flesh. We can't. We can't muster up the willpower to be better husbands and fathers. We can try to flex our fleshly muscles, thinking that somehow we're going to wrestle up the right strength to be better man. But I want to tell you something. In order to be more, in order to give more, it's only through Jesus Christ who strengthens us. The way to being a better father, a better husband, a better man is through Jesus Christ who strengthens me. So as we close, and I'll invite Amy to come up, we're going to see more love, more power, more of you in my life. And that's what we need. I can't speak for you. I need more of Jesus. I need more love, more power, more of you. I need more of Him in my life. And when I have more of Him, then I will be a better man, a better husband, a better father, a better neighbor. Because it's through Christ who strengthens me. Let's rise.